Podcast Answer Man, episode number 386.
Entertaining, educational, and encouraging content that makes a difference. This is GSPN.TV. Join the community.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Answer Man. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and this, my friends, is the podcast devoted to helping you take your message, your business, and everything you do in life to the next level. That's right, my friends, it does not matter if you're brand new to this online content creating world we live in. There's something we can all do to take our message to the next level. That's right, my friends, and today I am in the studio recording the intro to an interview that I want to share with you. Many of you have heard lately that I have been going crazy on podcast interviews. A couple of weeks back, I had told you that I had changed my entire process of how I handle all the interview requests that I get. And I've recently performed now and I had scheduled and now have completed more than 16 podcast interviews in the past 30 days. And it has been a true delight and an honor to be exposed to so many different and brand new audiences and to get an opportunity to share my story. And the cool thing about this is that I oftentimes get interviews where things come, the interview is done from a whole different perspective. And, it seems like every interview that I do, there's some kind of new insight about my story or some kind of thought or feeling that I have that is something that's valuable in each new episode or in each new interview that I do. And I recently did an interview with John Kramp and David Atchison. Now, they have a podcast called Your Leadership Story. Now, John and David are alumni of Podcasting A to Z. They were they're business partners or had been business partners. I think John's doing some new things today, but they still do this podcast together, and they had gone through Podcasting A to Z together and were just a true delight to work with. And their podcast, the production quality, the content, and their approach to podcasting and doing interviews is absolutely fabulous. It's unique. They have their own flavor of how they do things. And, well, it was probably one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. And I recently asked them, I said, guys, I wanted to take Christmas week off, but I would still love to be able to put some content out there on the internet for my community so that they wouldn't have to go for a whole week without an episode of Podcast Answer Man. I really enjoyed the interview that you guys did with me. Can I share that as episode number 386 of Podcast Answer Man? And they said, sure. And so you're actually getting ready to hear the interview that John and David had done with me for their podcast before the interview actually gets released on their own show. Now, I do want to give you guys, I want to give them a shout out and have you guys check out their show. It is called Your Leadership Story by John Kramp and David Atchison. And you can find them in iTunes just by searching for all of that. Or you can go over to theriverstonegroup.com. Again, that's theriverstonegroup.com. And you'll be able to find their podcast over there. It is an excellent podcast. And in fact, you'll be able to tell just by the quality of the audio and not to mention the content of the interview. I'm talking about their style of asking questions. Now, what's unique here, and I just want to give you a little heads up, this could potentially come out sounding like a full-blown advertisement for Podcasting A to Z. And that actually was somewhat of their intention. They wanted to expose their community to the understanding of the value of the Podcasting A to Z course to their audience, their community. And they also wanted to experience some of the things that I've learned specifically as it relates to leading 18 sessions of Podcasting A to Z, working with over 400 students, having so many extremely successful podcasts that have been launched from that course. And then, of course, having experienced some people who had gone through the course and did not achieve success for a various number of reasons. And they had asked me several questions during that interview. And to be honest with you, I kind of learned a little bit about myself, and I got to process a little bit of the thoughts of and feelings about what I have learned from working with so many students as a result of the probing questions that they asked. So one of my favorite interviews that I've done so far this year in 2014, I wanted to share it with you. And so, this is my little episode to keep things going while I'm celebrating Christmas with my family and friends. And I wish you guys a very Merry Christmas, and I'll be back again next week. And until then, here's my interview with John and David.
Well, John, I've been looking forward to our interview today with Cliff Ravenscraft, known as, listen to this, the podcast answer man. Is that the best name or what?
What a great tag. And when we were trying to launch our podcast, Your Leadership Story, we had lots of questions. And so we went to Cliff because he was the podcast answer man.
He is. Well, since 2005, Cliff has produced over 3,200 of his own podcast episodes and launched the Podcast Answer Man site, through which he has helped thousands, John, thousands of individuals and organizations launch successful podcasts.
In fact, David, if you were to go out and look at the top 100 podcasts in the business category of iTunes, more than 50 of those shows were created by people that Cliff trained.
That is astounding. That's amazing. And it's that training, John, that we want to focus on today. Cliff offers the outstanding coaching course, Podcasting A to Z, which has allowed Cliff Ravenscraft to transfer his knowledge and leverage his incredible skills as a teacher.
And since our focus is on leadership, we want to ask Cliff about some of the leadership lessons that he's learned from working with so many people through Podcasting A to Z over the years.
Well, let's get into the interview. I can't wait.
That's great.
Cliff Ravenscraft, welcome to Your Leadership Story podcast.
Wow, guys, thank you so much, David and John. I'm so excited to be here, and my wife is going to be so upset because my head is so big, I'm not sure she'll be able to get me out the door.
Well, before we get too far into this, John and I kind of need to clear up something for the record. So, do you still think we were the worst Podcasting A to Z students you've ever had?
What? Where does this come from? When you say still, I've never had that thought before.
Oh, well, seriously.
This was our self-critique.
Yeah.
We just go, surely.
Based on our careful analysis, that's what we came up with anyway.
We just said, here with your senior citizens group.
Now, let me tell you something. I remember the course that you guys are in, and I would say that you're among some of my favorite students that I worked with. And I don't just say that. I mean, if I didn't believe it, I just wouldn't say it. I'd just go on and say something else. But no, I remember working with you guys, and I loved it because, here's what I loved about working with you is I thrive on people who value the work that I do, and you guys were always so appreciative of anytime I gave you something of value, and I just remember that from you. So not only did I give to you, but I remember always just being so uplifted and fed from your encouragement through the course.
Well, Cliff, one of the things that I remember distinctly about that course about halfway in, I think I said to John, hey, I get it now. He really is the podcast answer man because he can answer all of our questions, and we had so many.
I'm the podcast answer man because I have this. Oh, wait, it's not up loud enough. Hold on.
Do it again. Here
you go.
Podcast Answer Man.
Okay, now see, I want to ask a real question here.
So
is that
jealous.
you singing? Is that it?
No, I actually, there's a jingle, a couple who have a company in the UK, and they have these voice talents that will create stuff for you. And so,
that's
Say,
so
John,
fun.
I'm jealous. We don't have anything that says anything about your leadership story. We got nothing, man.
Okay, we got to go.
All right. Well, Cliff, listen, you've worked with so many people over the years, and you've helped them start podcasting. I want to just begin our discussion today and ask you, what have you discovered about people?
that I love them. and that I feel called to serve them, and that there's all sorts of different people out there. There are people who are givers and takers, and there are people who literally want to change the world with their time spent on this earth, and those are the people I most want to do life with. And there are people out there who want to get as much as they can and collect and consume as much value from others as they can while they're here on this earth. And so those are just some very broad strokes of things that I've learned about people in general.
Well, and that's a wide range.
And that's a big category. I mean, you really could put the whole world into those two buckets.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is when I first started my business, one of the things that I struggled with was, working with both types of people. And it didn't take me too long to realize, hey, I no longer have an employer that tells me I have to work with those other people. Mm-hmm. And so I learned the awesome opportunity that I had to kind of say, you know what, I'd rather invest the time that I have on this earth with people who want to add value to other people's lives. And wow, the ability and the freedom to say no to working to other people, it's just been one of the most amazing opportunities and joys of what I do.
Well, and it's a true case study, Cliff, and that's what David and I have been just thinking about as we've been looking forward to this interview, and we want to just probe that experience. You've done so many things, and a lot of people don't know how much more broadly your impact is beyond just podcasting and just podcasting A to Z. We do, but today, just for this interview, we wanted to focus in on that. So I want to let you just reflect for a minute and to think back on some of your students in podcasting A to Z that have gone on to really launch successful podcasts, and think about what you observed about them during the course that you didn't see happening with some of the people that didn't really do anything much after they got out of the course. So how were those people different, and what showed up in that early stage when you were interacting with them?
Well, I have thought about this quite a bit over the years. The people who you had mentioned that are in the top ranked podcast in the business category of iTunes. One of the things that many of those people have in common is that they are, number one, incredibly talented in the area that they decided to focus on. So they have a real natural raw talent for what it is that they focus on, but also they were intentional about their practice and their is it honing the gift? Is that right?
Absolutely.
So they took time to really go deeper into that area of focus, really honing their skills. And as a result of that, they had tons of value to offer to people. Another thing is that they not only had the raw talent, but they also had the passion for the content. In fact, there was one guy who came to me. His name is he's not passed. His name is Dan Matson, and I'll tell you, he's one of my favorite stories to tell. He came to me and says, "Cliff, I'm so excited about this course. I've finished your first tutorial, and here's my question. I'm ready to answer my questions. I have one thing though. I'm thinking about two different topics." And the first topic that I might do is small business coaching. And the other topic that I might focus on is personal finance. And then he listed out all the reasons why he is talented and skilled and has experience in each of those two fields. And I wrote back to him and I said, Dan, here's the deal. I'm reading this, and if I were going to hire you for either one of those to work in my business, I would in a heartbeat. That is an impressive list of reasons why you are qualified to speak on these topics. But there's one thing that's missing from your mention of why you want to do one of these topics for your podcast. And I just want to ask you, you didn't say anything about how much passion you have for either of those topics. Mm-hmm. And Dan wrote back to me and says, whoa. He says, Cliff, I got to tell you something. I've been doing business I've been working in these two fields for the last 30 years of my life. And if I had to be completely honest, I don't have any passion for either one of them.
Wow.
And if it was up to me, I probably wouldn't do them anymore. And
wow.
I said, and I wrote back and I said, Dan, do yourself and the world a favor and don't create a podcast about either one of those topics. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote back and I said, Dan, tell me, is there anything that you're passionate about? Forget about the money for just a moment. We can bring that back into the picture. But if money were no object, what kind of topics are you really passionate about? Now, I was reading his response while I was out, I was standing in line at Chipotle. And on my phone, I read this email response back from him. And he says, Cliff, you know what? Okay, I hate to do this, but I got two of these topics. There's mountain biking or wooden boots. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
Wooden boots. It's like, okay, I'm all about going niche, but wooden boots, I'm thinking, is this like it from Dutch? Those wooden shoes, those clogging things, they paint fancy colors. I mean, seriously, a wooden boot enthusiast? So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to wait until I go back to my office and I'm going to respond to him and tell him to go with mountain biking. So I get back and I'm looking at it and I'm getting ready to respond to him. I wanted to read his message one more time so I could get a feel of, how I'm going to transition to what he said to how I'm going to respond. And as I was rereading it, he actually had said mountain biking or wooden boats. And I'm like, oh. So here's the deal. Today, Dan Matson has hookedonwoodenboats.com. And unlike some students who will create a podcast and they'll podcast for 10, 12, 14 weeks, 30 weeks, 20 weeks or whatever, and then quit, Dan Matson, I should pull it up. Let me just go here real quick. I will tell you, he's podcasted every single week since he's been in my class, and he just released on December 12th, which was December last week, episode 152.
Look at that.
Wow.
And has never missed an episode, and now he's known around the world as Wooden Boat Dan. He's the world's leading authority among wooden boat enthusiasts.
And it was all that passion that he had.
Exactly. So there are people who have raw natural talent that have honed their skills over time. There's those who have passion for the topic for which they're doing. And the third thing that I've seen as a quality of the people who are extremely successful versus those who are not, and we're talking about, the ones who are really doing this for, business purposes or for, as a outreach or message spreading outlet for their organization. The people who have a real strong sense of how this fits into their overall business model, or they have a business model. And one of the things that I've seen fail the most are the people who think, I'm going to create a podcast and I'm going to turn my podcast into a profitable full-time career. And what I say, and by the way, I've been doing this since 2005, December 2005. I know about 5 people in the world who literally make most all of their income from their podcast. 5. Yeah. All right. There are 276,000 podcasters out there, and 5 of them do it full time. So I don't think it's a great thing for people to go into it with this model. So what I suggest is that, listen, if you're going to create a podcast and you want to see some income as a result of your podcasting efforts, don't see your podcast as a business, but create a podcast that has a niche focus on a target audience. And what you want to do is you want to create a business model around that, create products and services, and add value to the lives of the people who are listening to that show.
See, I think that's so interesting how just to think about all the different people and how you've really figured this thing out and you've helped them so much. But I want to probe into to you a little bit. What have you learned about yourself as a leader through teaching podcasting and teaching this podcasting A to Z course over the years? What have you discovered about Cliff?
Well, I've discovered a couple things, and it actually is. It's not just through the course, but also through what led to the course. And what I've discovered is that I have a real desire to work with people and coach them in not just the technical skill. Although I have found that I have an incredible amount of technical skill that is very beneficial to a lot of people. And I have been given by God a great gift of teaching people how to do complex things and make it simple for them to understand. And so I'm incredibly thankful for those two things. But what I've learned is that my true calling in life is to encourage other people. And so I found that it's not necessarily the consulting that I love, but it's the coaching. I love the fact that, anybody can take my course, and by the end of the 4 weeks, I pretty much am guaranteed. I know they're going to have a podcast at the end of the 4 weeks. I've had over 400 students in the 18 sessions that I've already done, and I know for a fact that anybody, even those, I've had people come into the course who couldn't attach a photo to an email. So I know that all of those people can have a podcast. What I really have found about myself is what really gets me up at early in the morning, eager to answer people's questions, is the fact that I know that with every technical question they ask, there's almost every single time an opportunity to help expand their mindset of what's possible in life.
So you've really latched onto this whole idea, which I think is incredibly powerful, of helping see a person go from point A to point B, and just the fulfillment it sounds like you gain from really coaching that person forward. And that's really what leadership's all about. I think that's really fascinating how you've locked into that.
Yeah, and you know what really gets me is when I get an email 3 months or 6 months later and say, Cliff, man, I can't even begin to tell you the profound impact the 4 weeks I spent with you in A to Z has had on my life, and it has nothing to do with my podcast.
Wow.
And those are the emails and the letters that I get in the mail and the Christmas cards that I get. It's unbelievable. That's what I have found about myself, is that my true calling in life, I do know that overall I'm called to take my experiences in life and share them with groups of people, and to entertain them, educate them, encourage, and inspire them. And my real passion is helping people take everything that they do in life, not just their business, but everything they do in life, to the next level.
Well, and you live that out beautifully, and we want to affirm that. So let's probe a little more then. I want you to think, Cliff, about these various podcasting A to Z courses you've done, and I want you to think back on your experience. I know this is hard because you've done so many, and just think of some students that as they were going through, you just had this intuition, I think this guy or this lady is going to really do something. You just felt excited for them and encouraged, but then in retrospect, it ended up that they just didn't. And I'm wondering if you had any idea now about the kind of things that tended to trip them up, because that's part of that leadership insight. What is it in people that has them showing potential, but then they fall short of it?
Yeah. By the way, present company excluded. Yeah. You don't want to talk about us on that.
There was these guys, John and David, and these two guys.
Talk about them.
I thought that, man, they were referred by Michael Hyatt, so I knew that they were quality. No, I do. I can answer this right off the top of my head. There have been some people who have really shocked me over time. Because the first thing I ask, I have this one tutorial. It's called "Before You Record Your First Episode."
Oh yeah.
And
that was hard.
And I ask some pretty difficult questions, and I've had some people who have answered those questions in a way that I'm like, wow, this person is literally going to change the world. This person is going to have the most profound impact, and I am just beyond my, humbled to know that I am a part of helping them get this launched. And then 2 years later, get an email that says, Cliff, I am almost ready to launch my show.
Wow.
2 years later, I am only waiting for this. And I can tell you, it was from the very first week of working with them until the end of the 4 weeks, and then all the follow-up afterwards. I can tell you what really gets those people is the people who try to get everything perfect. Everything has to be completely in a line. Everything has to fall in place before they pull the trigger and make something happen. And every single time, it's caused some of the most amazing people with the most amazing stories to really fail to have a powerful impact in people's lives because they don't ever get out of the gate.
Well, and I remember that exhortation to us. I mean, you told us and you told others, get that first episode out. Just don't fiddle with it. Get it out, and don't even go back and listen to it again, because the only way you're going to get better is to do a lot of episodes. And we can't stand to go back down and listen to our first episode. We still struggle, but I can understand why that perfectionism would just be such a powerful block. And that's broadly applicable to everything in life and leadership.
And here's the thing. I mean, there's great quality in excellence. I'm not opposed to excellence in everything we do. But the reality is that excellence in starting out sometimes can be what trips us up and never gets us going anywhere. So
But don't you think there's a difference between perfection and excellence?
Yeah, I do. There is a distinction there. But what I'm talking about is here's what I'm saying though. I have launched several shows where when I started out, I did not even do it with excellence. It not only was it not perfect, it just wasn't excellent. It was pretty crummy. Matter of fact, my first podcast that I ever produced, if you go to iTunes and do a search for the weekly Lost podcast or just Lost podcast, or just search in iTunes for Cliff Ravenscraft and then look for the Lost podcast that pulls up. And what I encourage you to do in iTunes, click on reviews. And then when you're in the reviews, you can change the default setting to most critical. All right. And read literally 50, 60 people who have just completely trashed me. And you know what? Most of those very hateful, horrible things they said about me, absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. It was spot on. I was full of myself, arrogant. I was, I didn't take things seriously. And man, I learned a lot through a lot of really bad content. But what happened is over time, I discovered more and more about myself. I grew as a result of the bad stuff that I put out there. And today, I will tell you, there's a lot of people who will say, Cliff, man, I'm so impressed by the excellence that you have in your show. And it inspires me. And I'm like, well, I want to tell you, it didn't happen overnight. And it didn't even happen over a week, over a month, or over a year. So I do think that, there's a difference between perfection and excellence. And I say neither of them should be the overarching goal when you launch your first podcast.
So with that as a background in all of this thing, one of the areas that we think is a key to what you've done that certainly impacted us when we were, had this initial dream to launch a podcast, and we heard from Mike Hyatt, as you mentioned, about your course, was this idea that you kind of put it out there. Take this course. At the end of 4 weeks, you're going to know enough and have enough skill to actually launch a podcast. And I remember at the time just thinking that just sounded impossible. But it was so clear and it was so compelling that it sort of drew us in. So talk to us about that proposition. Has that always been a part of podcasting A to Z? And what are the other ways that kind of tangible short-term goal has showed up in the things that you've done and just become part of your leadership brand?
It has always been a part of podcasting A to Z, that proposition that by the end of the 4 weeks, you're going to have a podcast. And the thing is that came from the result of one of my first consulting gigs back in 2008 when I was started doing this full time. I was hired by a local preschool to teach preschool kids how to podcast, and I had to teach the preschool teachers how to podcast, and they ordered all this fancy equipment. They ordered all the same equipment that I had in my studio. And they asked me to come hook it all up and show them how to use it. And not only did they need to hook it up and show them how to use it, but they had to learn how to hook it up themselves because it couldn't be left out all the time for the kids to play with. So I literally had to go and teach these. You should have saw their eyes. Their eyes almost burst out of their head when I pulled a mixer out and they saw all of those buttons. And I said, listen, I see where you're going. Trust me, do me a favor. I want you to ignore. You do not see any buttons or knobs on this thing. Forget that they exist. And what I did is I took a towel and I covered up every single button and knob except for one row of them. And I said, see that? Does that look as scary as all the other ones? They said, no. And I sit there, I said, okay, now here's what I want you to do. I'm going to tell you what each button and knob is on this row is. I told them, showed them the label, and I showed them, this, and I said, do you understand this language? Yes. So if we turn this down, and I put their headphones on and all this stuff, I said, now, after 20 minutes, I explained to them that first row, and I said, do you guys feel like you have this down? And it's like, yeah. And I said, if I told you that if that's all you ever had to know, do you think you could handle this? They said, yeah. And I said, great. I took the towel off, and I said, now the rest of these are exactly the same. It just depends on what channel you're plugged into. And so,
Wow.
and so basically how that comes down into these things is, how do we learn anything in life? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right?
Yes, yes.
So it's every, I have come to the place where I believe practically anything is possible. I really do believe that. And at least anything that other people have achieved, I believe there's some realm of possibility that I could achieve it too. And while it may seem completely impossible for me, the fact that other people have achieved it means that it's possible for them. And I wonder if I could learn what they know, and if I could get to know what they know, how they got there, maybe it's going to give me a clue on how I could get there as well. And so I just have this overwhelming belief that pretty much anything's possible. And so I believe that I can take a preschool teacher who doesn't know how to attach an email to or a photo to an email, and I could teach her how to use this complex equipment and teach her what an MP3 file is and how to put it on the internet. And if I can teach them to do that, then I can teach anyone.
See, I think that's so interesting because you really do have a natural gift of making the complicated really simple.
Yeah.
And to me, one of the things, because John and I focus and think about leadership all the time, I see this teaching element, this skill that you have is such a profound, important skill set that every leader needs, that ability to break down the complex and make it simple. That's great. Cliff, one of the things that we observed in our experience during podcasting A to Z was what John and I like to call the messy middle of the process. And you probably know what I'm talking about. That's when we, and I'm sure others, just get to that point, you're kind of overwhelmed and you're confused and you start wondering, gosh, am I ever going to launch a podcast? As you reflect on this whole point where I'm sure many of your students get to, where maybe it's kind of that messy middle or it's a crisis point, what have you learned about helping people through that?
Well, I have to help them get out of their own head, because what they're doing is they start to get overwhelmed. They think, well, I'm not doing this as fast as I could, and so far all I've done was hooked up this mixer, but I have no idea what to do. And really, most everything it breaks down to what is the process. And if there is a process, and see, here's the thing, I intentionally do not share the full step-by-step process at the beginning of the course. Instead, what I tell my students is I invite you to trust me that by the end of this 4 weeks, you'll have a podcast. All I'm asking you to do in week 1 is this list of things. If you do these things, trust me that in week 2, I'm going to give you another list of things to do. And by the end of this course, all of that put together, you will have a podcast. And at the end, I will then explain to you how all of this has worked together, and now you have a podcast and how easy it is. And the thing is they'll never, if I show them the entire process at the beginning, they'll never buy into how easy it is. But if all of a sudden I give them bite-sized pieces and say, can you do this? Yep, I can do that. Can you do this? Yep, I can do that. And I let them take one step at a time, and I say, listen, so basically I get the messy middle all the time. Cliff, it's been 3 weeks. I'm a little bit behind, and there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. How am I going to do this? What do I do? Blah, blah, blah. And I say, here, all I have to ask you is this. Do you have your equipment? Yes. Okay. Has your equipment been hooked up? Yes. Are you able to speak into a microphone, and is it able to be recorded into your recorder? No. Okay. So here's what you need to do. So I find out exactly where they are, and I give them step by step what are the next 3 steps. So let's just say it's somebody else. Are you able to record into a recorder? Yes. Have you actually taken that recording and put it onto your computer? Yes. Have you put it in software and put your music in the front? Yes. Okay. Have you installed WordPress yet? No. Oh, Okay, so forget the file for just a minute. Let's install WordPress, configure it, and set it up. And so I find out, where are you in the messy middle?
Yeah, that's good.
Because here's the thing. You may, as a student, may not understand where you are in the process. What I happen to know is that the finish line is just right around the corner.
Yeah.
And so I'm the coach that's going to say, you know what? Don't give up. Where I see where you are right now, and I promise you, you're right around the corner from success. You're almost at the goal. And so that's what I do. I take people, I find out where they're at, what stage are you? And I hesitate. I'm going to share something with you. And the thing is maybe somebody here is going to take this course and they'll take advantage of this and they'll wait until the last minute. But I hope that those would listen to your show wouldn't do this. But here's what I know, and I know this from experience. The reality is, I could take any student out there who has equipment, and in a 3-hour phone call, I could take any student and have them launch a podcast in under 3 hours. I'm talking about they have their equipment in front of them, but they don't have it hooked up. And in 3 hours, they're submitted to iTunes. Now, for those students who have all their equipment and it is hooked up and they just haven't recorded their first episode, I can have them in iTunes in 45 minutes.
Wow.
So the thing is I never fret over the messy middle. They do. And so my job as a leader is to calm them down and say, where are you now? And here's the next 3 things for you to do. Immediately upon you accomplishing these 3 things, let me know and I'll give you the next step.
That's a great leadership lesson.
I think that is just profound. So as we're about to wrap up here, Cliff, we want you just to kind of reflect out a little more broadly. Take what you've been talking about and teaching through the podcasting in A to Z. And, I know you're at a point in your business and all that you do where you're expanding. You're applying these principles to helping people do more and different things in their life. So looking at the principles you've learned, how would you help people right now if they're sort of feeling stuck and saying, I'm stuck in my job, I'm stuck in the things that I'm wanting to accomplish, and they're trying to take something in their life to the next level? What sort of core principles now come to your mind? You say, I've seen this work over and over and over again.
It's so easy to answer that question. And that is, find somebody who is already successfully doing what you want to do at the level for which you want to do it, and ask them to help you get to that level. Hire a coach, hire somebody, find a mentor, read a book of somebody who outlines the steps on how they've achieved the success that they have. But find mentors, find coaches, and somebody who already has been through the process, somebody who hopefully has seen lots of other people through the process, and who can take you where you are in the messy middle and say, here are the next 2 or 3 steps for you to take to get you towards the next level.
Well, Cliff, we can say this. You are the one who is responsible for us having your leadership story that, has reached 50 countries and has really done more than we thought it would ever do. And so we want to thank you and for being the teacher and helping not just us, but so many out there. Yeah. We really appreciate that. And so let me just ask you, if somebody really wanted to know how they could learn more about you, what you're doing, and possibly even joining a future podcasting course, how could they find out more?
The first thing that I recommend that people do when they're confronted with me and what I offer, I first send them to learnhowtopodcast.com, which is an absolutely free tutorial. I don't even require your email address. It just basically gives you the basic foundations of podcasting. And if you're an extremely technical person, you'll never need to hire me at all, which is wonderful. Tens of thousands of people have been through that tutorial. Thousands have launched their show successfully without needing anything more. Now, the cool thing is that once you go through that, you'll get a good feel for the type of training that I do and the level of quality that I put into my work. And if you decide, I'd kind of like to have somebody coach me through this process, through the messy middle, and to help me with all the technical details and hurdles each time. And I wouldn't mind having that life coach to go along with it for a 4-week period of time. Well, my next A to Z course starts on Monday, January 12th, and you can go to podcastinga2z.com. And if you happen to be listening to this in 2017, 2019, chances are you can probably still go to podcastinga2z.com and there'll be an upcoming course of some sort. So check it out.
Well, Cliff Ravenscraft, we just would say to you, thank you. You just can't even imagine what an encourager you were to me and to David. And, you know, not only the podcasting, but I would say, David, that I think we learned as much about leadership and life as we did about podcasting.
Absolutely.
Through the things that Cliff did. And that's remarkable. That was an unexpected benefit.
And it was a fun process, too.
It absolutely was. So anybody out there that's listening, hey, you need to take advantage of this. And Cliff, thank you for giving us this time today. It's been our great privilege.
Thank you. The honor has been mine, and I'm incredibly blessed by the fact that you would have me on your show and to allow me to share my story.
Thanks.
Well, there you go, my friends. That wraps up the interview that I did with John Kramp and David Atchison over at Your Leadership Story. Again, I encourage you to head over to their website. You just head over to theriverstonegroup.com. theriverstonegroup.com. I'll put a link in the show notes over at Podcast Answer Man, episode number 386. So it's podcastanswerman.com/386. There'll be a link to the show notes there to head over to their podcast. They have so many great interviews from folks, and you get to learn a little bit about other folks' leadership story. Well, you know what? I pretty much believe that this entire episode sounds like a promo or a advertisement for Podcasting A to Z. It was, kind of cool that John and David had decided to interview me about what I've learned through that course. And, I do have a session coming up in just a couple weeks, starting on Monday, January 12th. As I'm recording this on Saturday, December 20th, I have 14 students already registered. I still have room for a few more. If you are interested, head over to podcastinga2z.com. Real quick, I want to say thank you to those of you who have decided to support Podcast Answer Man through Patreon. As you guys know, I make most of my income through at the Podcasting A to Z course, through some tutorials, equipment sales, and other things like that. But so many people have found that they have found an extreme amount of benefit from the content that I produce here in the podcast and on my site at podcastanswerman.com, and have found it so valuable that they really have never needed to purchase a product or service from me, but they were looking for ways. They actually asked me to provide other ways for them to give back or to contribute to the work that I'm doing here. And if that speaks to you, head over to podcastanswerman.com/Patreon. I'm already up to $32 per episode right now, and I want to give a very, very special thank you to Anna Malikian, actually, from the Mindset Zone podcast. Check out her show. Link to it in the show notes. Again, Podcast Answer Man number 386, podcastanswerman.com/386. Well, my friends, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Yeah. So glad I got this one in before Christmas time. For those of you out there who are hearing this right before this holiday season, I do want to wish you a very Merry Christmas. For those of you who are hearing it afterwards, well, my friends, I wish you a very happy, blessed, and prosperous 2015. We'll see you guys again next week, and until then, I encourage you to take everything you do to the next level.
Helping you to get the thing you do to the next level. Podcast Answer Man.